Victoria Mukha is a practicing gestalt psychologist, master of metaphorical cards, producer of the Moonly Project. In this podcast, we talked about how our inner child influences our adult life and learned about the dangers of losing touch with this part.
The actual concept of the inner child, the parent, and the adult came from the structural analysis that was created by Eric Berne. Parent, adult, and child are the three states of our self. And depending on this state, a person thinks, acts, speaks, and even behaves in a certain way. It comes to a point that even their voice changes, their behavior changes, and even the vocabulary that a person uses when speaking changes. And all these three states are regulated automatically. That is, a person may not even notice when he shifts from one state to another. It is regulated subconsciously, at a deep level. The inner child cannot be considered in isolation from the adult and from the parent. The parent represents, first of all, rules. That is the information that was received in childhood from parents, from authoritative adults. These are certain moral foundations, these are prohibitions, the standards how one should behave, how one should not behave, what one can do and what one cannot do, and the main messages of this ego state are I must, it is necessary. And when addressing others, it's you should, we should, this is necessary. So basically what we hear most often from our own parents, especially at a tender age when they are trying to raise us and instill in us some standards of behavior. An adult is probably the calmest state of our consciousness because it represents the ability to objectively assess reality based on the information that we receive, on the basis of our experience, on the basis of observations. It is the ability to make quick decisions based on this information, based on our experience. This is adequacy, this is equanimity, this is collectedness, this is what, in fact, we mean by the concept of an adult person. And the child is what lives in us from about the age of 4 or 5. Our inner child is always about 4 or 5 years old. It is creativity, it is originality, it is curiosity, it is interest in everything around, interest in the whole world. Releasing tension, receiving pleasant emotions. Sometimes, of course, it is all on the edge, because sometimes pleasant emotions are obtained due to acute sensations. But even if you are drawn to skydiving and doing something extreme, like bungee jumping or riding a motorcycle at 300 miles per hour, this is also an inner child. It means he seeks excitement, dreams matter to him, joy matters to him. It's a necessary part of every human being. But sometimes he is so intimidated, so fearful, that we do not hear him. That is, if you see a boring, joyless person who does not seem to be clinically depressed, but he is tired of everything in life, as if he's seen everything and nothing excites him anymore. This is a person who has lost touch with his inner child. For example, most often there is the following situation: parents were very strict, forbade to play, forbade to act out, forbade the child to do what he wanted. And as a result, throughout his whole childhood, the child was towing the line. When he grows up, his parents do not have such power over him, and they don't really need it. But for the adult, this function is now performed by his inner parents. So, he continues to toe the line, continues to forbid himself everything. He constantly tells himself, no, you can't, you must do this, you must not do this, you have no right to behave this way, don't be stupid, you are acting like a little child. So if you hear this voice, these phrases in your head too often, it's a reason to think about what happened in your childhood and try to work with a therapist or work on it yourself.
Can you give me an example of what the answer might be from your current state? If you recall your parents' phrases, is it acceptable, for example, to answer them from the present state in a rude way?
Make the situation absurd. So you take what you wanted to do as a child, where you felt that you were treated unfairly, you wanted to take revenge, and you take this childish revenge from the adult state and grow it to a hypertrophied state, right up to the state of absurdity. This is where this childish joy comes in. It is such lightness, absolute childlike happiness, although you realize that you will never act this way. But just the fact that you have experienced it in your mind and voiced it means a lot. For some, a simple constellation can be helpful, which can be done even without a therapist. Place 2 chairs opposite each other at home. And from a child's state recall a story that happened in childhood. So a person sits on one chair, and on the second chair he puts an imaginary mother or an imaginary father who did something bad. He remembers this situation, talks through his resentment, talks through how terrible it was for him, and then stands up, dissociates. You have to come out of your current state, make a circle around the room or look out the window. And then sit on the opposite chair, where mom or dad is sitting, and get into the state of mom or dad. That is, directly imagine yourself as mom and dad, and then try to perceive everything that your child has just told you. And at that moment some very strange and very important feelings arise. And you suddenly realize why the parent did that. The most important part of the constellations is that every constellation has to arrive to love. It can be that a mom, for example, said something hurtful to her child because she did it unconsciously, because her mom used to say the same thing to her. And all of a sudden, in your mom's shoes, you realize that she was told the same thing by her mom. Then you add another chair and grandma sits there, and now grandma tries to understand why she'd said that. And as soon as, in the moment of constellation, in the place of another person, you reach the state of love, that I was wrong, I did this and that, but I still love you, that's it. After that, there is a moment of discharging. After that, you can take your seat. In this moment, people often cry from what they have realized, from what they have heard, roughly speaking, from mother, from grandmother, from father, or from grandfather, even though it was all the same person. And this also helps to release some childhood traumas and some childhood resentments. You can also give a gift. This is a very powerful technique. You can go into the state of a parent, again with this constellation with 2 chairs, and from the place of a parent give yourself a gift. Visualize it, describe it. And at the moment when the parent passes the gift to the child, quickly move to the place of the child, that is back to your place, and accept this gift. And then it would be great to realize this gift somehow in real life, to buy it. When the therapist performed this technique with me, I went and bought a doll that my father had given me. And I have that doll at home now, and it serves as a reminder that my father loves me. A child can also become silent for a very long time, if not forever. If in childhood, approximately at the age of 4, 5, 6 years, there was some strong traumatic event, for example, the death of a loved one or divorce of parents. For children, it's about the same. Divorce is probably even scarier than the death of a family member, because children are not yet aware of death the way adults are. And if this subject is not discussed and not conveyed to the child that he is still important, and he is equally important for both parents, he may grow up automatically. So it will be a body of a child, but inside he would already be an adult. And therefore, his child's voice can also become silent for many years, and then he'll need to work either on his own for a very long time, or with a therapist in order to somehow shake up this inner child. This is also very important. What does a person who has lost touch with the inner child experience? This is a person who does not allow himself to make mistakes. He does not allow himself to do silly things. So singing or dancing in the middle of the street is something very out there for him. He doesn't know how to rejoice in small things. He doesn't understand what's the point of looking at the tree leaves, admiring flowers. It's nothing but a waste of time. Everything that seems interesting to other people, children in particular, he considers it nonsense. Why engage in nonsense and waste time on nonsense? Therefore, these three ego states that I was talking about, first the child, the parent, and the adult, they are in harmony, meaning their role should be approximately the same in the consciousness and subconsciousness of a mentally healthy person. If, for example, the role of the child disappears, then most often this place that used to be occupied by the child becomes occupied by the parent. So the parent begins to occupy a dominant position in the subconsciousness of a person, and this leads not only to the fact that a person constantly lives according to the rules, constantly forbids everything to himself, and constantly self-educates from within, but also this leads to the fact that the adult has very little voice left at the level of subconsciousness, and the person even loses the ability to adequately assess the situation, make an adequate decision, and reinforce their boundaries. A person who has lost touch with the inner child and is dominated by the inner parent often does not reinforce his own boundaries, constantly crosses the boundaries of others, prying into the lives of others, telling them what to do. And he has the same exact demands for himself, and therefore he can miss the moment when others start to control him. When he gets taken for a ride, he does not keep track of his boundaries and literally loses himself. This is what's dangerous about losing touch with the inner child.
How does the inner child influence our adult life? And here I want to talk more about childhood traumas. Meaning, how do they affect our life? How can we recognize them? And then how can we work through them?
When it comes to childhood traumas, the inner child still has a voice. That is, it is still inside the person. But as soon as a person finds himself in a situation that is somewhat similar to his childhood trauma, and not even in circumstances like it's not necessarily the same thing that once caused him trauma, it could simply be a situation that has created the same internal feeling for him, and the person falls into the same state that he experienced as a child. Either it is a very deep resentment, and from the outside it may seem that a person is suddenly offended by something minor and is behaving very stupidly and unreasonably. But in reality, he could actually enter a very traumatizing state. It's also very common for people to literally freeze. That is, they freeze emotionally and sometimes even physically. They fall into a kind of stupor when they experience a situation similar to a traumatic situation from childhood. And here the most important thing is to close the gestalt. Basically, to understand what your trauma is. Remember when it happened, what state you were in, and get out of this trauma through a variety of techniques. There are appropriate techniques for different people. There are constellations again, or there could be a very cool technique for getting rid of childhood traumas and securing your inner child. You can gift him some magical place, a safe place that is in the body itself. And here first you draw this place, a safe place, then you mentally imagine yourself going to this place. And then you realize in which part of the body you have this safe place, and you directly imagine this, for example, a secluded room that lives in your heart. And now you will know that every time you have a situation that reminds you of a childhood trauma, you are no longer in danger, because you can subconsciously retreat to this safe room inside of you at any time.
How else can you get in touch with your inner child? I understand the why, but I would like to know a little more about the how. That is, how to listen to him, how to find him. First of all, if you have no connection with him at all, how can you hear him, and how can you build a constant connection with him? Meaning how to balance these three states, how to get back up from the low point to this. What would you advise?
The inner child is responsible for our desires. And only if you listen to your inner child, you can, for example, fully realize yourself and become aware of your true desires and arrive to their fulfillment. You have to let the inner child out, even if at first it feels silly. You should engage in creative activity. It is best to sculpt, draw, make something with your hands. Just like the children develop fine motor skills, through this development of fine motor skills, you can again enter a childlike state and enjoy your creativity. Even if you don't know how to do it at all, and it turns into something not so beautiful, you don't need to be scared. You need to appreciate whatever you make. Sometimes you have to give yourself permission to act silly. Like I said, singing or dancing in the middle of the street, meowing in the store, doing something that causes a state like in childhood. Remember, like children doing something, being mischievous and laughing. When there is this light joy and mischievousness from doing something, you should allow yourself to do it, even if this state is very light. It's just that the inner parent can immediately turn on and start yelling that you shouldn't be acting like this in a civilized society. But who says that it is not allowed? It is very important to cultivate curiosity and pay attention to the things that you may look at every day, but not notice. For example, you have a plant on your window, and every day it is different. It may grow a new leaf, or it may even bloom. It may change, it may grow, it may start to nibble. And if you pay attention to it, not from the position of having to water the plant, but if you allow yourself to look at the plant and realize how beautiful it is, to admire it. The same goes to looking at something on the street, and just even when you are taking your usual way home, or going to a store or somewhere else, just try to look at that road, as if through the eyes of a child, through the eyes of another person. And notice something new and interesting that you may not have even noticed before, although you have been taking this road for years. It is very important to say no to others. Meaning the child is most often put in a position where he is a nobody, his voice means nothing, and he is forced to do what he is told by those around him. In order to empower him and give him agency, say no. Reinforce your boundaries, be aware of your desires. When you don't want to and aren't going to do something you're told to do, just say no. It gives you incredible power in general. And actually, these childlike states in your inner child are a huge resource for everyday life and for achieving some of your goals and fulfilling your desires. And the more in touch you are with your child side, the easier it will be to grow professionally, to invent things, to create startups. Just like that.
I realize that this is very personal work. Everyone still has to work on themselves. But if, say, I see that the loved one has a closed inner child, meaning they talk from the position of a parent, talk from the position of an adult, but there is no inner child in them. Is there anything I can do to help them unlock this child?
If you notice that your loved one has some problem with the inner child, you can always help. It won't always be a simple process, it won't always be quick, but you can at least guide the person on this path and ask them the questions: what do you want? What are you feeling right now? These are the questions you can actually ask yourself. These are the 3 basic questions that you should ask yourself every day at some point. What is happening to your body right now? What does your body want? What are you feeling right now? What emotions are you experiencing? And what do you want? It can even be a basic desire. Sometimes people get so caught up in their problems that they don't even realize that they are thirsty or they want to go to the bathroom. And here it's very important to listen to yourself on these 3 levels: the body, emotions, and desires. But these questions, as I mentioned, you need to ask both yourself and your loved one. Ask them to dance in the store. Well, that's just an example. Simply invite them to do some things, pay attention to some things that I have mentioned that are important for cultivating the inner child. If a person is very closed off, but he realizes that he will be doing this with company, meaning he won't be the only one who looks stupid engaging in some nonsense, and there will be someone else with him, it will be easier for his inner parent to let go of the situation. It's like you won't jump off the roof by yourself, but if you're with other kids, you might.
Let's say I'm interacting with my parents and that resurfaces a pattern. Are there any recommendations on how to deal with these patterns? Because we've been blamed for being bad kids, bad girls, misbehaving somehow. And I haven't reached the next stage yet, meaning I realize that I see it, I accept it, observe it. Like, okay, it's there. I'm not judging. I'm trying not to define it as a bad emotion, but it makes me uncomfortable. Is there anything I can do about it?
First of all, you have to admit that you are a bad daughter. This is exactly the state that should appear. I am a bad daughter. What do you want from me? I'm already a bad daughter. I want and can do whatever I want, and there is nothing you can do to me. Well, simply put, from the state of a bad son or a bad daughter, you no longer need to earn someone's approval. You can already do what you want and show your relatives the results of your actions. And this is where the real pride of parents for their children comes in, even if they went in a completely different direction from the one that their parents imagined for them. Here relationships are formed in a different way. Here there is already an option to get away from the state, when a 40, 50-year-old person in presence of his parents is stuck in some 5, 10-year-old age. And here is where adequate relations between adult children and parents can be formed. So there you go. So I generally preach that each of us who experiences these types of problems should recognize a bad son and a bad daughter in themselves and live peacefully, not proving anything to anyone. This is where you should listen to yourself. When you talk to your parents or other authoritative figures, who may subconsciously be in the role of parents or teachers in early childhood, if the fact that they criticize you or tell you how you should do things or what you are doing wrong makes you feel guilty, it means that the acceptance that you are a bad child has not set in yet. Without these feelings of guilt, everything is okay. When that guilt arises, you need to remind yourself that you are a bad son. So what? This is relevant for those who were overparented as children and who now as adults put their true wants and needs aside in favor of what their parents tell them. Basically, when they are not living their lives but are trying to constantly please those around them, parents, authority figures, spouses. That's when you need to work through it. If everything is okay in this area and you do not have some stupid and incomprehensible feeling of guilt, then good job. You are a healthy person. If the inner child is balanced and there are no distortions or increased levels of immaturity, where a woman acts more like a mother and has no opportunity to realize herself as a woman, so she starts to realize herself as a mother right away with her husband. Then it often happens that such families have no children, because she doesn't even understand why she would need a child, when she already has a husband. And if the parent outweighs, then again, the woman next to this type of man cannot realize herself as a woman, because here he takes on the role of daddy, and he is with her not in a male-female partnership, but in a relationship of father and daughter, and he is raising her throughout their married life. What are you? Where did you go? When are you coming back? Why do you need to go there? And who's going to be there? If you encounter this in your life, there is a reason to think and generally understand, why do you do this? For what? The answers may come from childhood, and then the practices that help you come to your true self will be helpful. If you have an evenly developed parent and child, then the adult too, one way or another, will become balanced. The parent will control the child will control the parent, and there will be just the right space and opportunity for the adult to develop.